Hey, good afternoon, guys and gals. This is Nate Pennington from RunDreamAchieve.com. Hope you guys are having a great start of your week, and Happy New Year's to all of you. Today's video, I want to talk on how to run a 5-mile race faster. And in the previous videos, I talked about the 10-mile event and what you really need to be focusing on in order to run a faster 10-mile or 32-kilometer event at a faster, more sustainable pace over the entire distance and not just the partial distance. So in order to run, regardless of what distance it is, whether you're training for the mile, the 5-mile, the 10-mile, or up to the marathon distance, it's all about sustaining race pace and minimizing the slowdown. You want to minimize slowing down better than your competition so that you can get to the finish line with a new personal best, and to be able to handle that ever-increasing amounts of lactic acid buildup in your bloodstream and in your muscles. And you want to be able to make sure that your body's working at efficient levels for as long as possible. Now, the 5-mile distance, I have a lot of experience with as well. I ran, in high school all the way up to numerous races when I ran professionally. The 5-mile distance is really one of my most favorite events. I mean, it's such a fast. It is a fast anaerobic event. It's more anaerobic than aerobic. So you really have to work on developing your speed on a consistent basis. So we always talk about gradual increases of your intensity on the track or on the roads. And then as you get fitter and your body and your heart doesn't have to work quite as hard, but the key thing to keep in mind is to increase your intensity and lower your rest periods between the hard intervals on the track or if you're doing them on the roads. The 5-mile distance definitely takes stamina and a great deal of a combination of speed and stamina. You need that strength, so you really need to be doing one VO2 max workout per week where you're really working on your overall leg speed. Examples of the types of workouts that I was doing over the years for the 5-mile distance was repeat miles on the track, repeat 200s to 1K repetitions, and again focusing first on developing the overall base. So we talk about the aerobic base and how important that is for your event, whether you're training for the mile or the 5-mile or all the way up to the marathon distance. You want to first make sure you're laying that strong foundation of easy base mileage where you're not focusing on your splits or your mile splits or kilometer splits. You're just focusing on time on your feet and building that endurance up. So again, it's just like building a house. You don't just jump into building the floors of a house. You first lay that foundation. So to run a great 5-mile distance and in terms of how to run a 5-mile race faster, you need that strong endurance aerobic base first. So don't be in a rush regarding this event. Preferably for the 5-mile distance, I would definitely, the longer you can branch out your training, the better. So I always focus on anywhere from a minimum of 12 weeks to a maximum of 16 weeks. So a 4-month block of training is going to get you very prepared for a 5-mile race. It's going to allow you the time to build into that aerobic base where you're first building your easy mileage, and then you start developing your plan of attack in terms of specific training. So if you're trying to run a 5-mile race, say in under 35 minutes, you need to train in a specific way. You need to train at race pace. You need to train at closer to your 1-mile to 3K race pace. So you're, again, running at paces that are much faster than you're planning on running at for the 5-mile distance. You want to spend some time training at speeds that you can only sustain for a few seconds. So examples of that is, repeat quarters, repeat 800s, repeat 200s, 300s, 400s, 600s. Those types of workouts where you're running, you're only able to sustain that type of hard sprint pace for a few seconds to a maximum of a couple minutes. Obviously you're not going to be able to sustain that for 5 miles, but it's, again, getting to the point where you can make race pace feel more manageable, and again, it's going to hurt. It's going to be a challenge in the latter stages of the miles of that 5-mile race. But if you're training sufficiently over a long enough period of time, and you're training at a paces that are below your goal 5-mile race pace, running at nice, easy jog pace, so obviously much slower than your goal race pace. So those are the days where it's absolutely critical that you recover from those hard anaerobic workouts we talk about. If you want to run a 5-mile race faster, you also want to run over distance. So again, getting to a point where you can branch out to doing your long runs at closer to around 10 miles. So if you can get your long run out from say 10 to 12 miles in distance, what is that going to make a 5-mile race feel like? You've already doubled the distance in training, or you've over doubled the distance in training numerous times over a consecutive weeks, over 16-week block of training. That is going to build an enormous amount of stamina and endurance that you're going to need for the 5-mile race. Now, granted, the 5-mile is definitely more, like I said, it's more of an anaerobic event. It's a combination of aerobic and anaerobic, but because it's only 5 miles, it does involve a lot of speed. So, and endurance, and strength, and stamina. You need all 4 of those components. So, in order to run a 10 or 5-mile race faster, you need to, 1, work on running for long periods of time on your feet. Spend some time doing those long runs. They don't necessarily have to be long and hard every single weekend. You know, I always talk about alternating one long run where you're running a percentage, preferably around 50 to 60% of your long run at a higher percentage of your maximum heart rate. That's going to be around, depending on your age, it's going to be around 85% of your maximum heart rate for a certain amount of time. So if you're doing, say, a long run of 10 miles, try to do between 4 to 6 miles of that 10-mile long run, the harder long run, at around 85% of your maximum heart rate. So a good estimate to get your maximum heart rate as an estimate is to subtract your age from 220. Now, the best way to get an exact overview of what your maximum heart rate is to get a VO2 max stress test completed. So again, that's more technical. You don't necessarily need to go and do that. But if it's something you really want to do, and you want to really get that exact overview of what your max heart rate is, you can go to a lot of you can look up exercise physiologists in your area and reach out to them and ask them to, I'd like to have a VO2 max physiological test done on a treadmill, and then they can kind of give you an idea after you doing that test what your maximum heart rate is and what your max VO2 max is. So that's basically your maximum oxygen uptake. It's the most oxygen your body can take in at your maximum effort. So basically those types of tests will test how much blood lactate is building up in your bloodstream at certain levels of intensity until they run you to exhaustion. They'll raise the incline of the treadmill, and they'll speed up the pace as well. So they will run you to exhaustion. That's a great test. It's very physiologically and mentally demanding on the athlete. So I highly recommend, if you're going to do a VO2 max test, that you go into that rested and prepared mentally and physically. It's a huge undertaking, but it's interesting to know that. I had one done at the USA Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. It was not fun whatsoever. But it gives you that idea of what your physiological capabilities are. Now, granted, no test is going to test the power of the mind. So if you want to run a 5-mile race faster, you also have to mentally rehearse what you want to do. If you want to run a 5-mile under 25 minutes or under an hour, you need to visualize yourself doing this over a long period of time. Don't just get on the track. Don't just get on the roads and do the easy runs and the hard tempos and doing the track workouts, because there's more to being a successful middle to long distance runner than just the physical training. You have to visualize and mentally rehearse, because it's going to hurt in the race. In a 5-mile race, it's such a fast race. Another key thing to keep in mind in terms of running faster over the 5-mile distance is pace yourself. Do not try to win that event in the first couple miles of the race. I would recommend holding back quite a bit in that first 2 miles and make it a 5K race. So once you get to the 2-mile point in a 5-mile event, then you start racing. Then you start picking up the pace. Then you look around and see if your competition's really, if they've really done their homework and if they can sustain the pace. If they cannot, try throwing those surges in the race and break them. You know, a hard surge for like 100 meters in a 5 mile race will definitely test the athlete mentally, and you'll know really quick if they've trained at paces much faster than their goal 5 mile race pace. So that's really key. That's a real important piece of the puzzle in terms of running a 5 mile race faster. You need to experience what it feels like to be running at closer to your 3K to 5K race pace, and do that once per week. Also train at, as far as your tempo runs, do one tempo run per week as well. Again, doing a 5 mile race, you can get very strong doing between 2 and 3 miles for a tempo run. Even stronger if you can get it from 3 miles to like 7 miles, because you're going a little bit further than your goal event, which is 5 miles. So again, if you can sustain running between 88 to 92% of your maximum heart rate for 7 miles, how much more stronger are you going to be over the 5 mile distance if you've done this in training? So again, it's so important not just to train at your goal race pace, but to train at paces that are much, much faster, much more aggressive, more like sprint types of efforts, and that's going to make you very, very prepared to be able to sustain that pace over the entire distance and be able to make those moves in the race that your competition more than likely is not going to be able to do, because they have not trained sufficiently at the pace or far below the pace. And more importantly is, if you're jogging on your recovery days and you're taking it easy and allowing yourself time to recover between the hard anaerobic efforts, it's going to produce that supercompensation effect. And if you haven't looked up supercompensation on Google or Bing or all the other search engines, look it up. The most powerful component of successful running falls in the rest period. It's what happens after you're done doing the hard workouts. It's what you're doing in your off hours that counts. It's not to minimize the hard track workouts or the hard anaerobic workouts you're doing, whether that's hill repetitions. I'm a big believer in hill repetitions as well. Find a good hill that's about 200 meters in length, sprint up it and come back down. Sprint up and focus on your form, and focus on pumping your arms and staying relaxed. You want to develop those fast twitch muscle fibers. And the more fast twitch muscle fibers you can recruit, which occurs from these hard anaerobic workouts, these hard sprint workouts that we're doing that are, again, much faster than goal 5 mile race pace, it's going to help you have that extra oxygen capacity when you're running at goal race pace. So again, you want to sustain the pace for the entire distance. You don't want to just say, man, I was on the pace I wanted to run for 4 miles, but I fell apart in the last mile. It doesn't matter what you did in the race, is how you finished the race. What time did you finish in, and did you meet your goal, your time goal, when you crossed the finish line? So I hope this video on how to run a 5 mile race faster was helpful for you. If you have any questions or anything I can help you guys out with, feel free to leave me a comment below the video. I know 2021 is going to be a great year for you guys. The fact that you're here already tells me you're seeking answers. You're looking for methods and ways to get better at your sport and in your event, and in this particular case, the 5 mile race. Again, I know all about this. This is a great event. I ended up running 24:32 for 5 miles in college at the University of Notre Dame, which is right around the street here. I drive by the course that I ran that on, and it's an exciting event. It's definitely an event that's over quick. So if you go out too fast, you can really burn out quick and really get away from the goal time you have in mind. So it's really key to be patient early in the early stages of this race. So keep those things in mind. Continue to focus on the things we talk about. Your hydration practices and training. Definitely learn how to take in more fluids in your long runs. Granted, you're not going to be drinking a ton of fluid in a 5 mile race because it's so short. But if you're focusing on the longer events, which is the 10K, half marathon, really the hydration is very important, and your nutrition is always important. What you're doing, again, off the track and off the roads. The faster you can run a 5 mile race, the stronger it's going to make you and more prepared you're going to be to run a 10K or a half marathon, 20 miler, 10 miler marathon event. So I wish you guys all the best in your training this week. And again, if you guys have any questions or concerns, any topic that you want me to cover, anything I can help you guys out and gals with, feel free to leave me a comment, and I look forward to talking to you guys all in the next video.